Missouri has found its portal quarterback, and it's Austin Simmons. Let's talk about his massive potential right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And all Tiger fans are very focused on the football portal right now. But of course, Missouri basketball takes on the defending national champions tonight in Columbia against the Florida Gators. Good news is Trent and Jayden are reportedly going to be back for the Tigers. But of course, tons to get to on the football field. Marvin Burks entering the portal, lots of receivers that the Tigers are kicking the tires on. Of course, we got to start with the quarterback position. And quickly, I do want to start by telling you today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And indeed, the first purchase of the transfer portal, it appears, is Austin Simmons, the former, current Ole Miss quarterback. In fact, I believe Austin is going to stay on the roster with the Rebels as the backup quarterback to Trinidad Chambliss until, the Rebels are eliminated. So, unlike Beau Pribula, Austin Simmons hanging around for his squad. Take that for what it's worth. But I'll just say this, Austin Simmons is a really interesting player because obviously, hey, if you saw my short that I put out on social media yesterday, I think the obvious question is, if Trinidad Chambliss beat out Austin Simmons, if he's a backup at Ole Miss, then why should Missouri want him as its starter? I think that's an obvious question that, has some pretty obvious answers to it. Number one, Simmons won the job in the offseason, in fall camp, was the number one guy, took an injury, and then Chambliss, frankly, came in and just took the job. Has obviously played tremendously well, has Chambliss. We saw what he did against Georgia in the quarterfinals here just recently. But as for Simmons, if you think this is a guy without talent, Stephen Willis over at Locked On Ole Miss, for one, completely disagrees with you. And I certainly, in the next week or so, I'm going to reach out to Stephen. We'll do a crossover and talk more about Austin Simmons one-on-one. But reached out to Stephen last night, and he told me that he's a, quote, huge fan of Austin Simmons. Said he throws a beautiful pass and has 1-1 NFL draft potential. In other words, he thinks Austin Simmons is so talented, he could potentially be the number one overall draft pick in the NFL someday. By the way, 2 years of eligibility Simmons has remaining if he wants them. So this is interesting on a whole bunch of different levels. Obviously, if he balls out for Missouri, plays 2 more years at Missouri, what does that mean for Matt Zollers? Well, quite honestly, that's a question you have to worry about in the future. I've seen a lot of Missouri fans saying, hey, we don't want to scare off Matt Zollers. Number one, I agree with you. In a perfect scenario, I would love to keep Matt Zollers on this roster for his entire career. I'm a big fan of his potential still. He simply needs more experience, more reps, more time. But 2 years, that's a long time. That's a long time to potentially wait. And my point here is that if you're Missouri, you just simply do not have the luxury of going, I'm going to worry about my young quarterback and his feelings. I'm sorry, that's just not the world of college football, the hyper-competitive world of college football in which we live. I just don't think that's a realistic view, to be perfectly honest with you. I think it's much more obviously realistic to say, hey, you got to win every single year. You got to look at your roster as basically turning over every single year. You cannot ever rest on your laurels or, frankly, even worry about the future anymore. How many high school guys in the last couple of cycles are even still around for Missouri at this point? I've brought up so many guys who have transferred out already. Well, now you're looking at Marvin Burks heading to the transfer portal, by the way, a guy who was certainly in the 2 deep, played a lot of snaps as a young player, and yet, looking for possibly a new, different, more lucrative, who knows, opportunity. Who knows what these guys want when they enter the portal. I will say, of course, it's not impossible that some of these players could come back to Missouri. That's certainly within the realm of possibility. It's certainly within the rules. But I just can't think of a lot of prominent examples of Missouri players who have officially entered the portal and come back. So until I see otherwise, I'm just going to assume that all of these guys who have announced their intentions to leave are indeed going to do so. Now, of course, I brought up the most obvious initial question with Austin Simmons. To me, my biggest second question is, what does Austin Simmons look like in the Eli Drinkwitz offense versus the Lane Kiffin offense? See, what I think is interesting about this move is this is going to give us a real litmus test here. I think Austin Simmons is almost your control group, if I'm using that scientific term precisely there. But basically, Simmons is going to tell you if the Eli Drinkwitz passing game is broken or not, in my opinion, because clearly it was working. It was working at Ole Miss for Austin Simmons. It wasn't as though they were a bad offense or a bad passing game. He simply got hurt. Chambliss played great and took over. But if the Missouri passing game next season with the presumptive starter, Austin Simmons, or frankly, even with Matt Zollers, but to this point here, my scientific analysis here of the control group that is Austin Simmons, if that Missouri passing game looks stuck in the mud with Austin Simmons at quarterback, guess what? Then we'll know it's Eli Drinkwitz's fault. I mean, really, how else can you look at it then? And that is the thing. Coaching is so important in this sport, in college football, that there really could be that massive of a difference. I mean, Lane Kiffin, say what you want about the guy. I frankly was disgusted by his behavior and have been for a few weeks. The fact that he's just left his team in the middle of a playoff run, to me, is absurd on a whole bunch of different levels. But you got to give Lane Kiffin this. He can coach up an offense. So quite honestly, if Missouri doesn't figure out the passing game next season, I don't know when they ever will under Eli Drinkwitz. And if it looks as bad as it did this previous season, I mean, an entire reimagining of the offense is in order. Frankly, I think that's already in order, at least on the passing game side. The run scheme for Missouri, hey, nothing wrong with that. We put it, basically any running back you put back there in an Eli Drinkwitz offense is going to get you 1,000 to 1,500 yards and be very effective. We've seen that over and over again. The passing game, on the other hand, I think we've probably had one good season of a Missouri passing game under Drinkwitz. I'd say that was 2023. Certainly the last two seasons have been disappointing. This past season, wildly disappointing in the passing game. So Austin Simmons, to me, his presence next season is going to tell us so much about the state of the Missouri offense. And frankly, if Eli Drinkwitz may need an entire rethinking of the whole thing come 2027. And while the quarterback is obviously the most important part of the passing game, well, you need somebody to catch the ball as well, don't you? And Missouri is obviously being aggressive in the passing game this offseason with pass catchers as well. So let's talk about some of the names that Missouri is reportedly in on here coming up on the program in just a minute. But you know what? First, I do want to tell you about Gametime, because during college football season, I know it's already wound down, but you know what? It's never too early to start thinking about getting tickets for next season, or if you want last-minute tickets to college basketball. Maybe you want to go to Missouri, Florida, and Mizzou Arena today. Well, you know what? Gametime gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing tickets all season long, and experiences, by the way, in just a few taps. And by the way, I bought some tickets to a Mizzou game a few weeks ago. It was so easy to just send the tickets digitally to the people who I was going to the game to. It was really easy peasy. Gametime is the best way to get all your tickets. So download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. By the way, just a couple more quick thoughts on Simmons quickly. Number one, just because Stephen Willis says he has number one in the overall in the NFL draft potential Folks, that's not a prediction. I've heard so many names the past couple seasons, from Lenora Sellers to Garrett Nussmeier, guys who do it. Oh, he could be the number one overall pick. Well, could and will be. There's a lot of massive space between those two words. And also, I will say a couple beyond just Stephen Willis, by the way, the Ole Miss fans who commented on my shorts last night. It was all positive stuff from Ole Miss fans. Now, is that a representative sample? Again, of course not. Nothing scientific about it. I thought it was interesting that the people who are Rebels fans, unprompted, who reached out to me, it was all positive stuff about Austin Simmons. So I thought that was at least noteworthy. Take that for what it's worth. But you know what? Missouri is real big on some wide receivers right now, including Iowa State wide receiver Xavier Townsend. He's going to be visiting Notre Dame and Florida State as well as Missouri, as he tells the media. By the way, Ja'Cory Thomas, another guy from, let's see, where is old Ja'Cory from? Old Dominion. There we go. Excuse me. I'm really hemmed and hawed there, didn't I? But Ja'Cory Thomas, another receiver to keep your eye on there. Plus Wyatt Young, another interesting player. He is from North Texas, one of the best passing games in the country, more of a slot receiver type, probably, which, by the way, would fit a need for Missouri. Missouri needs a slot receiver with Kevin Coleman exhausting his eligibility. And by the way, Daniel Blood, speaking of slot receivers for Missouri, Daniel Blood entered the transfer portal as well. And Blood is a guy who's had his moments for Missouri, but just never quite worked his way into the regular rotation. I was thinking maybe that was possible next season. Apparently not, though, I would say at this point. Now, on Marvin Burks, by the way, this was a bit of a surprising development if you're a Missouri fan, especially from my perspective. When CJ Bass entered the portal, the young safety from East St. Louis, I thought, well, that's a bummer to lose that depth piece, but I kind of figured at least most of our starters will be back. Well, with Burks moving on, that now Missouri's probably going to have to be in the safety market too. Again, making all more complicated choices for Eli Drinkwitz all the more complicated. And the thing with Burks is, I think a lot of Missouri fans, noticed he certainly gave up some big plays in the passing game. I'll be honest, I think he was more well-suited to be a box type of safety, like a strong safety, in other words, than a free safety, the last line of the defense. It just felt like too often he was more worried about the run game instead of the passing game as the last man back. That was just my real simple critique of Marvin Burks there. But I do have to say I'm kind of amused that we have to not only get transfer portal announcements, but now it's like every single player on the Missouri roster who's coming back next season, well, apparently they need some sort of announcement as well. And I guess it's necessary, I suppose, in 2026, if you want to just take all the questions off the table. And I guess if you're Darius Smith and Matt Zollers and Brett Norfleet and even Blake Craig, I guess you do need to actually come out and literally say, hey, guys, I'm coming back next year. We can't just assume that anymore, I suppose. But again, just another kind of weird note on this bizarre world in which we live in. And speaking of bizarre worlds, well, it was kind of bizarre when Beau Pribula, of course, was currently on the Penn State roster and had to leave before the college football playoff. Well, Beau obviously leaving on the move once again. He's visiting Virginia Tech. Hey, his former coach, James Franklin at Penn State, is now their head coach. I don't think that's a big surprise to anybody. But speaking of tech schools, how about Georgia Tech? Also, another place that Beau is visiting as well, along with Stanford reportedly in the mix. I got to say, Virginia Tech obviously makes sense because of his connection to James Franklin. But at Georgia Tech, I got to say that one interested me. If I'm a Beau Pribula fan, I think that's a pretty good fit for him. I can see him doing a Haynes King impression. I mean, Beau Pribula likes to physically run the football. That remind you of Haynes King? I can see it. I'm not saying he's going to be that good, but I think Georgia Tech would be a good fit for Beau Pribula and his skill set. I really do. And by the way, speaking of quarterbacks, well, before Missouri ended up with Austin Simmons, There was some talk that Missouri was going to be involved, according to Matt Zenitz. There we go. Matt Zenitz of CBSSports.com. He was saying Missouri was going to be involved with DJ Lagway. There was also some more reports from CBS Sports that Kennesaw State quarterback Amari Odom was going to be on the Missouri radar as well. I think Odom's a really talented, really interesting and talented player. Frankly, if Missouri would have had to go with a cheaper option, I think he would have been interesting. It's 6'4", 205, good runner. Would have been interesting to see what he could have done, obviously moving up to the SEC. We're going to see it somewhere. He's going to be a Power 4 quarterback somewhere, I would say. Now, as for DJ Lagway, the former Florida Gator, I love his talent. He looked great as a freshman, no doubt about that. I just wonder with Lagway, again, it's all about the shoulder injury with him. That would be my question with Lagway. Frankly, I just think Simmons is a much safer option than him. I do think Amari Odom was a really interesting option, though, and I'm very curious to see where he ends up and how he plays in 26. And by the way, similar to that Austin Simmons is going to reveal some stuff about the Missouri offense this year. I think if Beau Pribula ends up being a starter at Georgia Tech or Virginia Tech, it'd be really interesting to see how he does in a different offense as well, isn't it? And a little breaking news here. Just got pinged on my phone by Power Mizzou's Twitter account that Oregon cornerback Jaleel Florence tells Gabe DeArmond that he's going to visit Mizzou, Texas A&M, and Arizona State, possibly also Kentucky as well. So the first real name I think I've seen that Missouri is going to have an official visitor at the corner position. Obviously, with the Tigers losing their top 3 corners this past season, that's going to be an absolutely huge priority at what is obviously a premium and expensive position. The Tigers are going to be far from the only team looking for a corner in the portal. They probably got the biggest need in the Power 4, I would say, in the entire country. I don't even think that's a remotely controversial thing to say whatsoever. And by the way, for as weird as college football has gotten the past few seasons, for as much as bowl games have obviously a lot of the interest has been, well, I shouldn't say interest, but I guess, I don't know, the attention, the seriousness with which these programs take bowl games has certainly gone down a peg. Well, boy, fan interest really not going anywhere, at least if Missouri and Virginia was any indication. 6 million viewers for the Gator Bowl is what that game pulled. I mean, that's pretty equivalent to a game 3 or 4 of the NBA Finals most years. Now, Game 7 last year did 15 to 20 million viewers, I think. But just for some context there, I mean, for a game that is basically meaningless, my goodness, for all the problems that college football has, interest, at least in the short term here, is obviously not going to be one of them. But you know what? Speaking of problems, well, the Missouri basketball team's had a lot of problems this year, and injuries have been certainly among them. So you know what? It's going to be a great news. Missouri finally getting Trent Pierce back on the floor tonight. Also, Jayden Stone coming back as well, just about right on schedule there. So great news there if you're a Missouri fan. Let's talk some Mizzou hoops coming up on the program in just a little bit. But you know what? Speaking of basketball, yes, FanDuel is making basketball even better, every Friday night before the games tip off. FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. And NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays, again, from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing. Opening the FanDuel app during happy hour always brings you something new, whether it's a boost, a bonus, or other surprises. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. It's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Now, as all of you everydayers are well aware, I'm not exactly feeling very optimistic about Missouri basketball right now. And that's been the case for well over a month now at this point. I just simply don't think this team has enough. It's as simple as that. But if I'm wrong, And technically, Missouri, of course, still has plenty of time to turn this season around. Well, obviously, it's going to have to be with Trent Pierce and Jayden Stone. I'll just be brutally honest with all of you. Tonight against Florida, while this is not certainly as good of a Florida team as last season, it's still a top 25 caliber unit by all indications. And right now, Missouri is not a top 100 unit, as far as I can tell. I just don't see any chance that Missouri wins this game tonight, especially with Pierce and Stone probably, again, slowly working their way back in, especially in Pierce's case. But even with Stone, I just think more than likely, even if he comes back and plays just as well as he did to start the season, to finish the season for Missouri, all of my experience with basketball tells me that probably doesn't happen on night one. Basketball is such a feel and a rhythm type of sport. Generally speaking, night one back, I'd be shocked if Jayden Stone goes out there. Well, let's just say really pleasantly surprised if Jayden Stone goes out and scores 25 points or something like that. If he does, well, maybe Missouri really does have a chance tonight. I just frankly don't see that happening. And, well, it's probably going to be another ugly basketball game is my prediction. Maybe the Mizzou Arena magic will make something happen for the Tigers. Maybe Missouri can just find a way to outscore the Gators, because I think that's probably what it's going to have to be. I just don't see a scenario where Missouri wins it, 67-66 or something like that. No 67-66. I just don't see that type of final. I think if Missouri wins this game, they're probably going to have to score in the 80s or 90s at the very least. But hey, thanks as always for following me and listening and watching on Locked On Mizzou. I might just get you another pod on Sunday. We'll see. I know I didn't do my full 5 last week with the New Year's holiday and everything happening. But boy, there's a lot happening in the transfer portal right now, and there's no better place to hear about it than Locked On Mizzou. By the way, follow me on social media everywhere on Locked On Mizzou. And if you would like this show ad-free, check out the Everydayer Club. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer for $5 a month or $50 a year. You can get this show ad-free, access to our Discord server with all our Locked On hosts and more. So again, check that out in the description of this podcast. So until next time, I am John Miller, and thanks as always for listening to Locked On Mizzou.